We're here today in New York filming for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive. My name is Monk Rowe, and it's a great pleasure to have bassist Jimmy Lewis with us. Welcome. You're a Kansas City native.
No.
Oh, you're not?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville. What was music like in Nashville when you grew up?
Well, it was a lot of jazz around the schools, you know. And they had a nice band at Fish University, big band, you know. I started, I was around most of the good musicians that came. And so I met a guy that was going to Fisk. He's Professor Sneed. And he played all the string instruments and started me out on the ukulele. I started out on the ukulele I was about 10 years old, and I got to be pretty famous, you know, around
On the
town.
ukulele.
And so I played in the high school, and you know, this little concentration little thing. And then one day I was sitting on my front porch playing the ukulele, and a guy came by in a car and stopped in front of the house and says, I wondered, I said, why is this guy out here? You know, he didn't come in there, stood there, and I just kept playing, you know. So finally he called me to come over to the car. I came over to the car and got in the car with him. He says, how long have you been playing? So I guess I had been playing about 2 years, you know. So he said, well, I got somebody I want you to meet. And so he took me to a guy named Bill Reedus. He's a band leader, but he played guitar. So I met Bill, and Bill asked me to play a few tunes. I played a few on the ukulele, and he hired me on the spot. You know, it was such a surprise. You know, I said, well, now, what am I going to do with a big band playing the ukulele? So Bill said, well, I play the background on the guitar, and so you take all the solos on the ukulele. I was soloing on the ukulele like it was a guitar. So we played, went into a place called the Top Hat Lounge, and went in for 2 weeks. And the man liked us so well, he kept us for a year. 1 straight year, 7 days a week.
For a whole year?
Yeah, on ukulele. At the end of the year, he says, everybody keep asking about a bass fiddle. So you don't have one of these? And no, we don't. So I said, uh-oh, they're going to get rid of me and get a bass. So what I did, I went down the next day to a place and got me a bass. Brought it home, didn't know anything about it. Had a man that's so tuned up. And the first string, the G string, I could play everything on the G string.
Yeah.
It's one string, you know, back here. And so I got me a book, I think one of these Bob Haggett books. And I stayed in that book for about 6 months. And I came out playing better than anybody in the town, you know, to tell myself. Yeah.
Well, I think your ukulele playing must have helped.
Yeah, it was
you were
for tone, you know,
yeah.
hearing sound and chords and all that, you know.
Right.
So I went back, took the bass to the club that night, and the guy was surprised to see me walk in with a bass, you know. I took my ukulele too in case it didn't work out. So I played, you know, they called off tunes, and I played everything by ear, everything in tune, you know, and everything, but on one string. That time I used to use the gut strings on the bass. And so I'd wear out a string a week.
Oh.
Every week I had to get a new G string, the other string is just couldn't
They were
use.
just sitting there.
Yes. So after a while, I stayed in that book and I learned how to play the bass pretty good, positions and chords and all these things, you know, harmonics and everything. So Then somebody called me for a record date. Now, I never made a record date. I think it was Bullet Records, yeah. And so I went down there, and no music written. So I played all the tunes they had, and so they paid me. I get home, phone rang, they called me again, same company. I went back, did some more, and then I got back home, and a guy called me and said, "How would you like working the club with me?" I said, "Well, I just finished the club, one I said, but he said, "Well, this club is a little different. You're going to have to play shows."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had learned the bass well enough to do that then. So I went to a place called Zanzibar, and there's a big club. With seats all around up here, and down here, a big dance floor and bandstand over here. So I went to that place, and I formed a little trio called the Blue Sky Trio. So I went in there, and we played first set. The people were dancing, and everything. And they want to know about the bass. Where did you get the bass player? I did everything wrong. My string was too high, had tape on my fingers, but it had a big sound. I could play.
You must have been working awful hard at it.
Yeah.
Right?
So after we stayed there for a while, the man said, "Look, next week we're going to have a show every night, 7 nights." And said, "When would you just your trio play?" And said, "We're going to have maybe 6 acts to play for."
Mm-hmm.
They had dancers, singers, comedians, everything, all kinds of guys dancing on skates on top of vibes and all that. So we had to play his music. So the group I had, we had formed a style sound like a big band, the best you could, from listening to bass and Duke and things like that. We take and play those riffs and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the trio would play the same way. So the people liked what we did, and the place started getting crowded like this every night. 7 nights a week they were doing just like it. So I stayed in there, I think, about 3 years. And then I left and went to another club right down the street called the Era Club upstairs. So got in that club and we played a few tunes just with the trio, then we had a horn, And then when we had a horn, one night the guy came in and says, a guy came in with a guitar in his arm, old ragged coat, and hat all crumpled up. He says, "Could I sit in with you guys?" So we looked at the guys, said, "I don't know." Said, one of the guys said, "You think you can play?" I said, "I don't know, let him come up." He got up and he tuned up the guitar, all open string,
Uh-huh.
And so when he said, "What do you want to play?" So we started calling a jazz tune like High the Moon and stuff like that. He said, "Okay." And played, and the guy played so well. When he got through, I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Bill Jennings." Bill used to play doggy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so left-handed too, guitar upside down play. So after Bill, we left the stand. I said, "Now I got to get myself together," because you're gonna have some good people coming here.
Mm-hmm.
So then one night, a guy named Jimmy Hensley came in, and he heard me play. So he says, "How would you like to go to Louisville, Kentucky, and play in a club with me there?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, it'd be a quartet." the horn, bass, piano, and drums. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I went in this club, and we played for about 2 weeks. About 3 days before it was time for us to close the engagement, Basie and his group walked in. He stopped at the door back there, and he listened. And I was walking behind Jimi Hendrix playing the bass, down the aisles back and forth. So he asked his manager to come over and talk to me, and wanted me to join his band, So I didn't know what to do then. It was a big time,
Yeah.
But Nat Cole, King Cole had called me, wanted me to take Joe Comfort's place, because Joe was leaving. So he sent me a manager to come join the band. And let's see who else. Ira Joe Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
He was a singer. He used to come to my house and sit down and write songs together and all that. And so he had sent me money to join his band at a certain time. Now here come Basie. So I told him, I said, I got to go back to Nashville first, and I'll let you know later. As soon as I get back to Nashville, 2 days later, he called me on the phone, Basie did, from Chicago. It says, I sent you a ticket. You got a ticket on the way. Meet me in Chicago. Well, now I'm shocked. Now I don't know. I said, I don't know what to do. I got all these guys' money. Or what they are. So I talked to a few of the guys in the club. They said, well, what you do, go with Basie, you get more experience. Say, we're going to miss you and all that. Say, but I think it'd be a good deal for you. So I went with Basie. Met him in Chicago. I go to Chicago and go to a place called Southway Hotel. And I was sitting in the lobby waiting all day for Basie to show up. Now, I didn't think about getting a room or anything, waiting. So I, in case I was in the wrong place, right from Nashville, down south. So I sat there, and until about, it must have been about 9 o'clock at night, and in walks Clark Terry. Clark Terry, he looks at me, I see Clark Terry with his big old coat on, big wide shoulders, on the coat, and these draped pants on, he used to wear at that time, and a hat, curved. I looked, I said, now, wait a minute. I'm getting some other kind of company. And so he said, man, I said, get your room, and you get a room, and said, we don't know when Basie show up. I said, I thought we were going to start work right. He said, no, we'll wait for Basie. So I go and get a room. I think we waited about 3 days for Basie to show up. Basie showed up, and he came in, boy, it looked like he had been partying for days.
Is this when Basie had the small group?
Yeah, small group. Yeah, small group. We had Wardell Gray, Clark Terry, Gus Johnson on drums, Freddie Green on guitar, me on bass, and we used Buddy Franco.
Can I read something that Joe Williams said about that group?
Okay.
Okay, he says, I worked with them at the Brass Rail when he had Clark Terry, Wardell Gray, Buddy DeFranco, and in the rhythm section, Freddie Green, Jimmy Lewis, and Gus Johnson.
Yeah.
Talk about swinging. They'd get into some things that would swing you into bad health.
Yeah, man. At that time, I was fast on the bass, and I had a different sound from most of the guys because I never learned to put the strings where they really supposed to be. But being around Ray Brown and Oscar Pettiford, all these guys, they got me out of that. Said, look, put your strings down. Says the bass gonna have the sound it's supposed to have. Anyway, you don't have to play it hard or anything. So I did, and I got used to it after a few weeks. And Joe Williams used to come in, and he was very shy at that time. He come on the bandstand, and he sing these little love songs, just, real sweet, and then you walk off the stand, I said, wonder why Basie like him so well. And so I asked Basie one day, I said, Basie, what you see in Joe Williams? He said, you just wait. He said, I see something that maybe nobody else sees. He said, but that man can sing. I said, okay. So I stayed with Basie, and we worked the brass rail down the loop. We opened up in one night, and all the people were sitting at the tables, and so we basically now start off real soft. We started playing soft, I thought so. I'm playing louder than anybody. I've been used to playing like that. Bass said, don't play so loud. They said, they'll hear you. So I cut down the bass. And bass set a tempo, and you watch the people's feet. He said, okay. So everybody's patting their feet, even though they're holding a conversation. He said, now, Gus, pick up your sticks. Gus was playing with brushes then, and he said, pick up your sticks. Say, we got them now. And boy, we opened up. Everybody turned, and looked. He couldn't believe it, man. Buddy Franco walked out to the stand, and man, that little cat could play. He and Clark Terry started doing the trick. Clark take his horn, take the mouthpiece off, and just put it in the end of a glass and blow,
Yeah.
Make all kind of funny sounds, Gus John, then here comes Wardell Gray. He'd walk up and he'd play something like Lester Young, And we started playing anything that had Neil Hefty was making arrangements for the band.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil wrote all these things, man, this beautiful thing, And we'd make the thing sound like a 16-piece band. And Freddie Green, boy, he's like a metronome sitting there. And you couldn't get away from him. But you might get the tempo might move up a little bit, I get excited. And Freddie said, come back here, right here. And boy, that thing would take off to like he'd sit there and give signs. He had all kinds of signs he'd do with his face, when he wants you to play louder, softer, and when he get ready to close the number, he'd double his fist,
Mm-hmm.
And like if he wanted some excitement, he'd stand up from the piano and look at you, And boy, and Gus would start on the drums. You could hear the thing that sounded like it's coming up out of the floor. And boy, the people just went crazy. We went there for 2 weeks, and they kept for 6 weeks in there. And after we left there, went to another club called the Capitol Lounge, and went there for 2 weeks. By that time, we had added another horn. We had Marshall Royal. Marshall Royal came in the band, and when we hit the Capitol Lounge, man, whew, people just couldn't believe it. People would stand down and look, and they would applaud for the same tune over and over, And we'd play and play and play. The man said, Bass said, well, I guess our 2 weeks are up here. The man said, no. So you got a few more, so you got 8 more weeks here.
Wow.
Man gave us, we stayed there 10 weeks. And then we went out to California to a place called the Oasis. And went in the Oasis. And the same thing happened there, just over and over. And then we got a call from one of his agents said that we had to do a movie with Sugar Child Robertson. He's a little piano player, looked like a little midget. So he went and did the movie. We did movies out there on a lot around 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But we get paid for that time, just being there. Bing Crosby, he'd come through in a little car, Frank Sinatra was out there, went out to his house, went out to, what's the name, Esther Williams' house. She had all the back was set up with all that swimming stuff, I think it must have made a picture back there. And we went to Rochester's house, in the open house. He never closed his doors. People sitting all around the pool, going to ice box, get your food, anything you want to do. He hardly ever there,
What was the success of that group? What do you think it was attributed to? Just because he had such a great
Well,
rhythm?
Basie, he knew how to select guys that would fit together. And then after he get the guys, he talked to them. He said, look, this is what I want. This is the way I want you to sound. He said, in order to sound like Basie, you have to play this way. And he tell them how he want, and somebody come in and bring an arrangement, he take the arrangement and listen to it. He said, all right now, I want to take that section out in the trumpet there at 8 bar and leave that open for me. And say, now, I want you to do this, and I want you to use your hat to certain places, and leave your plungers, and then trumpets, I want you to just shake the notes to certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, okay, we get up and we do it. He said, now that sounds like Basie,
That's great.
And a boy or something.
Well, we were talking about the small Basie group.
Oh, yeah.
And did it get to the point where Basie wanted the whole band back again?
Yes. Oh, you ready now?
Yeah.
One night, Fred Green, he didn't join the group right away, the small group.
Mm-hmm.
But one night he said, I need Freddie. I got to have him. So that's like my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
So he got Freddie. Then he said, I'm going to have to have a big band, man. I'm so used to that sound. I just got to get the band back. So he got a lot of guys together, and we got the band together, and we had a rehearsal down to, let's see, I think we had this at Club de Lisa. In the daytime, we used to go down there and nobody there and rehearse. The band sounded pretty good, Had let's see, who we have in that band? Oh, he changed 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
What he would do, he'd get all these guys and we'd play, and he'd listen, And you could tell when not satisfied, he used to keep his head down, Yeah. Then he gave everybody a notice. Everybody in the band get a notice. He said, well, you're going to break up the band. All right, he break up the band. Then he come around our room. He said, now, that didn't mean you. That didn't mean Clark Terry. That didn't mean Gus. And it sure didn't mean Freddie Green. He said, now look, said, don't worry. Said, I'm going to get another band together. Got another one. That one was better. So then he got a third band together. He did the same thing, got another band. Now all these guys, man, when they got together, it sounded like they've been playing for years together, So he said, this is what I want, I can do something with this. So we had a rehearsal. Let's see, I had Nat Pierce brought some arrangements down. Nat Pierce from Boston. And Neil Hefty brought some, and somebody else brought some. And the guys put down in front of him. Clark Terry and Wardell Gray used to pick up the music like this, never seen it before, and sing it over, man, just like they're reading it with horns, and put it down and play it. So I looked at these guys, I wonder if I could take this. Now this is a little bit, different from. And so he said, don't worry about it. He said, I'm gonna feature you. He said, I never featured a bass before. He said, but I'm gonna feature you. I said, when? He said, never mind, I'll handle it. So he wait till we get this movie called Conversations. I don't know if you saw it or not. And through the whole movie, they couldn't think of a tune, but he told me, he said, what you want to do? Just get out there and do what you want to do, and we'll follow you. So I said, well, I got a little tune I'd like to do. He said, okay. He said, we'll call it conversation. So you play as if you were asking a question, and said Clark Terry would come up and take a solo, and then you answer him with your bass. Then Wardell come up and Buddy, just like that. So they named the tune Conversation, and the thing went over well, man. For a long time they played it, and I think you still once in a while you see it now on TV. And he said the first time I ever featured bass, And so then I get out. We went to the $1 Million Theater. Played the $1 Million Theater, and they had an all-girl band there too. Came in one, and we played. And as we left that theater, I think we went to, went to Las Vegas. Club, big club, they called it Trocadero, something like that. At that time, I don't know what it is now. But anyway, we walked in the club, and we had Normal Miller dancers, had a girl singer, and I think we had Pearl Bailey's brother, a dancer, and somebody else. But anyway, we put on a show. That night, we get on a big stage, they put those lights on, everything looked different. I said, this must be Hollywood. So it's so beautiful, man. And so when they put lights on, and we play everything right down here until the show come on. People dancing all out there, And time for the show come on. Basically say, all right, that's it, 1 o'clock jump. We hit 1 o'clock jump, man. Everybody knew that, the people recognized it right away. They started frauding. Played that, and then the man announced the show. When the show came on, we played that show, man, and when we got through, people just kept applauding. Look, they wouldn't stop, And so he had to play another tune, I think tune, I can't think of that. But anyway, we left there, and we had to go to back to California, to the Oasis. And then we left and went on tour with Bill Eckstein and somebody else. But anyway, Bill Eckstein was the big headline. And, George Sharon, Bill Eckstein, somebody else was three different. Oh, Nicholas Brothers. That's right. And
It's quite a lineup.
oh man, and we get out there. Now Nicholas Brothers didn't have any music, so basically I'm gonna leave it up to your bass. So I created a tune to fit every tap that they made on the floor.
Oh, great.
Oh man, and that with the bass and them doing all that stuff, slides and all tumbles and all the things, everything. And so they liked it so well they wanted to write it up, but then they wrote the tune. And I can't even remember what it was now. But it fit them, man, just like it was a glove.
That's really interesting how the dance and the music are so intertwined like that.
So everything they slide, make it slide on the bass, and all that stuff. And then they flip them, when they hit, they make little thumps. I had all kind of tricks I could do,
Yeah.
And all the bass players, they done that stuff now, I've done it way back then. I didn't know it was just sound good to me.
Let me ask you about a little thing. I was glancing at your notes, and you had a story about flying with Basie. Sounded kind of interesting.
Yeah, we had some army camps to do. So we had to ride the army planes, the one with two tails, and that big thing in the middle, And so we got on one day we got on this thing going down to one of the camps, and it was noisy. This thing was so noisy you couldn't hear, Now, Billy Eckstein, all those guys, they used to riding these, you know. But me, I was scared to death. You know, we all had on parachutes. Basie had on a parachute. He's sitting right by the door, you know. So we were going to Texas, Corpus Christi, Texas. So the plane took off, got there, but before we got there, something happened. Just before we got ready to land, they couldn't get the landing gear down. So the guy kept punching back in the back. There was some long pole, and they couldn't get it down. So the man said, we're going to have to circle around and go up a little further and come back around again. So they went around and started back, you know, to see if they could land. Still couldn't get open. So one of the guys went over on the side, and the base sitting right by the door, like in the door here, to pull this big door open. Now we're flying on it. So I said, what's this for, man? What are you doing? The guy said, well, see, we're trying to get a little more air in the plane. I said, air in the plane? I said, man, we don't need no more air. So he said, well, I'll tell you. He said, we're having a problem with the landing gear. And he said, we might have to bail out. And basically looked at me. He said, what do you mean bail out? So he had the pilot say, look, are you gonna be out too? The pilot said, no, sir, I got to stay with the plane. He said, you got to stay. Well, I'm gonna stay with you. He said, I'm going out with you. He said, because if I jump out and I pull the string and the chute don't open up, he said, man, I can't fly. I don't have any wings. but everybody laughing, and so Billy teased me. They saying, man, I said, we're gonna crash. Oh, believe me, I don't know what to do. And I'm running back and forth and down. It's funny, you know, I've never been in a plane before anyway.
Did they finally,
Yeah.
something finally happened because you're here with us.
Yeah, well, so we get to Corpus Christi, Texas. Now, till finally we land, everybody sat there about 15 minutes before they got out of the plane. Quiet as a pea, boy, you hear them out quiet, you know. So that's why they started getting up one by one, taking off the parachute, taking the instruments and going outside, you know. Got outside, we had to play under some trees. We get out there, and they set up under these trees out there, hot sometimes. Oh man, it looked like a big field, and people as far as you can see. And they had all these big speakers, you know, all that stuff out there. So they set the bandstand up, all the bandstands, we put the music on, you know, Valerie took care of that. And so then bass went up, test the piano out, see if it was in tune, you know, and everything. So then they called us, because band. We got up there and basically was telling about the trip, you know, what the little trip we have playing, all that. So people settle down, you know. He talked to the guy, settle down, so he listen. We out in the open, you know. We started playing. As soon as we started playing, all these little scorpions out of the tree started to falling on down the bandstand. And it's fall into the bell of the horn, the guy dump it out, keep playing. I got me some string tied all around the bottom of the pants leg, you know. I was in case it crawl up my leg.
Oh, God.
But,
Oh,
and
man.
so when we finished the job, now we got to take this same plane and go to California.
Oh, man.
So I get everybody, so me and one of the color, we walked out to the plane and looked in, you know, and we see all these parachutes on the seats, you know, and Cutter said, you know, that look like dead people, man. Said, we can't take this plane, can we? I said, no. So see, I said, well, let's go tell Basie. We don't think we're going to go on this one. So we went and told Basie said, oh, I don't blame you. He said, but I got to stay with the band. And so you go ahead and wait if you can get a train out, Midwestern, California. So we did. We got a train. We got to California 3 days later.
Mm.
Now, I think we missed one gig though.
Uh-huh.
But we got to the gig and we played and everything. So we asked Basie, said, how was your trip? He said, man, that was the worst trip I ever had. He said,
Oh.
good thing you didn't come sick because somebody would have died.
Yeah. You have a million stories.
Oh,
I
man.
can tell.
So many, I didn't even put them down, but you know, all the different bands I worked with and how I got to work with bands, including Cody Williams, Duke Ellington, a lot of bands. Buddy Rich, I did a TV show with him. And we did shows with what's the name of the lady used to sing When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain? Kate Smith.
Kate Smith.
Yeah, we did
Goodness.
show with her. And did all kinds of things, man. Made movies with Helen Humes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we made another movie with Billie Holiday, and that was nice. That was really nice. And then I did a lot more with just different people when I got back to New York. You know.
Worked with King Curtis.
Yeah, I
Is
worked
that-
with King Curtis for 7 years.
Wow.
Formed the style of the band, everything. But then I would go downtown, and they called me for a record date, you know. So I had to start playing the Fender bass. And I had different style from all the guys, you know, on the Fender bass. My own creation, you know. But it worked out nice for me. So first week I went down, I think I made about 3 sessions, and I got $700 and something. So I said, now wait a minute. There's money in this thing. I wonder if I can keep it going. So then I gave King Curtis my notice, because they kept calling me, you know. And a guy named Bert Burns, he saw me down there. He said, Jim, I heard you on one of these records down there. You playing the Fender? I said, yeah. He said, well, you got a pencil and paper? I said, yeah. I kept a little book, you know. He said, I got 17 dates for you. 17 recording dates. Man, I put that down, and I made those dates, and you know how to go to the union and pick up your check.
Mm-hmm.
I'm standing at the window to pick up check, man. The guy standing over looking mad. I picked up so many. And so after that, I started this a play on Broadway called Hair. It came along. So there's a guy named Galt McDermott. He had a lot of music that he had been trying to get people to listen to, but he didn't know what to do with it. He told me, he said, I don't know what to do with this. He said, I can't think of no bass lines. He said, I thought of the melody, but I can't think of the lines. I said, I'll tell you. I said, play it. I'll put some lines to it. So I put some lines to the music, and I think he put on a record called, a company called Kilimanjaro, I think he said it was, out of somewhere in Canada. And the thing, he called me 2 weeks later, and he said, Jimmy, he said, the thing is selling, people listen to my music. You know, I said, yeah. He said, could you come down to do one more date? So I went down, and then when I got there, that's when he told me about Hair. He said, how would you like to try to do that? He said, they got a lot of music. I said, well, we should give it a try. I don't know. Went down there and went to the Shakespeare House down on, I forgot the way it was. Anyway, we get down there, and that's where we rehearse, you know. Put the music down. So so he had a lot of chord down. So I'd take it and build bass line from the chords, you know. So I kept doing that, and they had about 30-something tunes. And and so I look at the guys and look at the actors act out there. I said, now, this kind of line would fit what they're doing, you know. So I'd look at that, and then I'd put the thing together. And so we had a piano player named Neil Tate. Mm-hmm. Neil Tate said, I'm going to write these things down for you. So he wrote a whole book about this thick of all my bass lines, you know.
Wow.
So then comes time to record the Broadway show. So we recorded, and the thing was hit.
I guess it was.
Yeah, let's see. I think in about 2 years, they sold about 80 million records. Man, oh, it was
And
then
your stamp was all over that thing.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I just spent a lot of time trying to get it to sound like them.
Right.
They had Zane Paul, Don Light. This Zane Paul, he played bass, clarinet, and tenor, alto. Don Light, trumpet. Eddie Williams, trumpet. And Neil Tate, piano. Idris Muhammad on drums. And Charlie Brown, acoustic guitar. And let's see who else we have. Alan Fontaine, he played guitar, electric guitar. So now what I did, I said, now, I got to voice this stuff to make it sound different from anything, because this show is different from anything you ever heard of. It looked like it wasn't anything. I figured it lasted about 2 weeks. So we got this thing together and did it. Then the critics came in, and they listened, and they watched the show, and they liked it so well, man, doggone, it was a hit. All right, now, thing got hit, it was hit. We had to already record the music and all that stuff. But I wasn't satisfied with the sound. So I took it, and Gore said, look, I got to do another show. And they said, you just take care of the music part, you know, and keep the band together, hold the band together. So I changed the whole style of the band. Not really. The music was the same, except I updated it a little bit, you know. And the kids went crazy on the floor, man. Oh, they were so glad to do the show. But they had an opening in the show where they sit there and talk on the floor. And so I said, well, they need something in this act. So I created a tune called Happy Feet, Happy Feet. And they played very soft. You had to really listen to it, you know. But it was just a rhythm section. 2 guitars, electric bass, piano, you know. We'd play that thing, man, and it was almost like a jazz tune in parts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
At the point, and we played that thing, and the people in the audience, you could see them moving to the music, you know, all that. But we never really put it into show, you know. I just want to feel that. And after that, when we got ready to close, this is what got me. We got that one day, Michael Butler, he was the guy that, you know, he had all the money. Yeah, I think he said he had $300 million. So when he came to back the show, you know, his father had some money he inherited. And so he was a young guy, he didn't know what to do with it. He said, well, I'll do this, he said. He used to give us big parties. We'd ride up and down Fifth Avenue in those double-decker things, man. Mm-hmm. It was nice. All, you know, Four Seasons, we'd go to Four Seasons and all this stuff. So Michael, one night, you know, after about, let's see, we were there for 5 years. 4 years later, the people said, well, I think the show should go on Tufus. You know what I mean? They had to cut the price.
Oh.
Said it wasn't doing so good. That's what they told Michael. The house packed like that. So Michael came in one night, and one day, he said, went to the box office. He said, I heard that the show wasn't doing so well, so I came to see what was happening. So he said, well, we don't know about that. He said, it's been packed every day and night. He said, okay. Yeah, so he went up in the big office and talked to some of the people. He told them, said, the show is closed as of this minute. So he closed the show out. Man, and but 4 days before they closed it, somebody stole my bass book. All the other books was there, but my bass book was gone. And I went down to one of the record companies we were doing business with, and I happened to see all these books on the floor piled up, you know, all these books, music, gospel music. So I said, let me look at this. Picked it up and I looked at it, and I see my bass lines there. I own all the music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back and told God. God didn't know anything about it either, you know. But I tried to get some money back in.
Yeah.
So then that's when we had a little lawyer. He checked in and found out how much they were selling and all that.
Right.
And he told me, he said, you know how much money you got coming? I said, no. He said, you should have about $250,000. I said, what? He said, they sold $8 million in records 2 years ago.
Mm.
I said, oh, man. So, well, you know, that's part of business anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tried and I couldn't get anything happen with that.
Mm.
So then they had closed. It closed. I decided I'd form me a little group, jazz group, called Three Sparks and a Flame. Well, she was Flame, wife. So what we did, I wrote about over 100 tunes at that time. I got more now. But we decided we're going to do all our tunes, you know. But we ended up doing a lot of bass and duke and all these things with different arrangements, you know. I would arrange all the stuff and set the style I want, you know, behind. And we could make that trio sound like 8-piece band, no horns.
Mm-hmm.
We could do that, and so we got pretty popular. We started getting all these big jobs, you know, around town, and they called us in a place called Cafe Society. It was down on 22nd Street and Broadway, I think. And we went down there, stayed there a while, left there and went to a place, another place on 54th Street. So went there and for a while. And people liked it, they kept calling us back, you know, and all that. So I took the group, and so we decided we'd do our own booking.
Mm-hmm.
So I let her handle the business in there, you know.
Yeah.
And we getting a lot of good gigs, you know, all these places out way out in the suburbs, some places out in Long Island, way out Long Island, and these big golf clubs and all that. And so we did that for a long time. Then I decided to do a video. I did a video, but it didn't sound like I wanted, you know. And now I'm working on a Broadway musical. But it's going to be a different kind of musical from all these other musicals that you've seen. It's going to be like a play. It's a love story.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a play, and I wrote all the music for it. I'm just trying to put it together now.
Well, you have had a marvelous, amazing career, and it's still going, which we're so glad to hear. And,
until this happened to me, but seems like I'm getting to be all right.
If we come back to New York, will you join us for part 2 of your story?
Yeah.
That's great. That's just, you told us some absolutely wonderful things, and on behalf of the college, I'd really like to thank you for your time, and I hope we can get together again.
All right,
You just
thank you.
Marvelous.